Hello, my name is Fiona Kane, and this is the Wellness Connection podcast. Today, I'm going to be talking about some films that I've seen and some general things in society that I'm observing at the moment. So, just a little bit of a general chat. The first thing I wanted to say is I saw the Whitlams with the Sydney Symphony Orchestra at the State Theatre on the weekend. Got my fill of live music. That was brilliant. Love it. Really, really love the Whitlams. And whenever anyone hooks up with any of the symphony orchestras, it's always amazing. So really grateful to have been able to do that and go there and see that. That was amazing. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about, though, I wanted to talk about some films I've seen lately and some themes in some of the films I've seen. So the first one I wanted to talk about is Brendan Fraser's film, and it's called Rental Family. So essentially, he plays a sort of out of work actor who's based in Japan, and ultimately he gets hired into a firm that rents out. So you act for this firm, but you act more in personal way, as in you might pretend to be. I'll give you an example. So there was a girl who was her mother wanted to get her into a good school. She was a single mother, and apparently it works better for you if you've got a father in the picture. So this mother sort of rented him as the father of the little girl, so they could get the girl into a school. So that kind of more personal thing to help people with different things in their culture. Now, because Japan is very much like a shame and honor based culture, so it's really, really important there to maintain your honor. So apparently, I didn't know this, but apparently there are these firms in Japan who do hire out actors for roles like these to help people maintain their honor in challenging situations. And it was a beautiful film, really well done, and Brendan Fraser is fantastic, and so were the whole cast, the lovely other people in this film. It was really, really good. But what it really outlined to me was that whole. I suppose it's always good for us, especially in the Western world in particular, for us to look outside of our bubble and look at other people's cultures. Sometimes we look at other people's cultures with rose-colored glasses, and sometimes we look at them with judgmental glasses, and sometimes it's good to go somewhere in between and actually just see them for what they are. Most cultures have good things and have bad things about them, so it's quite all right to see both. And it was interesting just seeing this culture clash there of him thinking that one thing is reasonable, it's reasonable to do this thing or that thing, and that really affecting the Japanese people in a totally different way, and them seeing it totally in a total different way, because of course being American, it's all about, you have freedom and you get to choose what you want to do and all of these rights and blah blah blah, and that compared to the Japanese is a very, very different story. So it's just really, really interesting seeing that blend, and that's sort of what he thought was reasonable and what he thought was a good thing, they were horrified by, and if not found it to be illegal, some of the things he was doing. So it's this really, really interesting clash of cultures, and from that point of view, it's really, really worth seeing. So it helped him see, even though he'd been living in Japan, his character had been living in Japan for 7 years. It helped him see the culture at a whole new level and get an understanding at a whole new level than what he had before. But it also allowed the people who was working with maybe to get an insight into American culture more as well by his response to things. So yeah, I just thought it was a really, really interesting film, and it's really interesting to see how different cultures view different things. And I think previously I talked about the fact that some cultures have more of a shame culture, and in the Western world we don't really have shame much at all anymore. And I don't think that's a good thing. I don't think we want an extreme shame culture, but no shame the other end of the spectrum isn't always a good thing either. So sometimes it's all about the balance. So anyway, I thought that was really well done film, really enjoyable. Like there's funny moments, but also some really sad moments as well. But overall, really enjoyable. Really made me think, but also it's just a very human film about human beings and how they manage the world and how different cultures do it in different ways. So well worth watching. I really enjoyed it. So So that was what did I say that film was called again? Rental Family. So I highly recommend that. So the other film I saw, one is probably a bit more controversial, but that's all right. I've never shared. I don't shy away from controversial topics, especially now. I'm just go. The whole point of this is to have real conversations about things that matter, and that's what I'm doing. So the film I'm going to talk about now is actually the new film by Pauline Hanson, who, if anyone's who's not in Australia, she's an Australian politician who, well, they call her far right wing, but she's not. She's just, the thing is, in the world at the moment, anyone who is not Lenin or Marx is classed as far right. So anything further right than extreme left is classed as far right. But anyway, she's much more on the right, though, that's for sure. Anyway, it's a film that was brought out by her, and it's a sort of like a cartoon type film, and so it's kind of an expansion. She had a cartoon series called Please Explain, which was quite funny. So this is called a super progressive movie, and it's, I suppose, if you know anything about Australian politics, you would find it funny or interesting, and not even just Australian politics, but just the general kind of woke versus anti-woke worldviews. It's an interesting concept. Anyway, whether or not, whatever you do or don't think of Pauline, whatever you do or don't think of her party or her politics, the theme in the film that I found really interesting and I thought was worth discussing is essentially what she's doing is she's talking about, so in the film, Australia's this dystopian Australia where we're completely super woke and super progressive. And there's a theme in that where she talks about this thing called the cape of victimhood, or the hood of victimhood. I can't remember the exact languaging, but it's the cape of victimhood. And essentially, the cape of victimhood is this thing that you get to wear, and when you get to wear it, it protects you from any criticism. You cannot criticize the person who has the cape of victimhood on, and so you're right about everything, and you kind of get worshipped, and you cannot be questioned about anything. And that's kind of, I suppose, further on from what I was talking about last week in regards to the whole everyone's even an oppressor or they're oppressed. So essentially, a cape of victimhood gets to be worn by the people who are deigned to be oppressed, and and so they can do no wrong once you get that victimhood cape. You can do no wrong. You're perfect. You're wonderful, and um, but what the film ultimately showed is that that cape might seem like a good thing at the time because you get all this power and all these people love you and it's fantastic, but it actually just saps the life out of you as well, which is kind of what victimhood culture does. I think when we celebrate victimhood, when we celebrate and feed and love on victimhood, that is not good for anyone involved. And also like I was saying before, when we look at either a culture or a person or a religion or a whatever, but just we look at a group or another person that might be different to you in some way. But when we look at, or it might be your culture, it could be yours as well. But when we look at something like that, or religion or whatever it is, and we deify it, or we say, oh, that one, that's the right one, that's the one that you can't question, that's the one that's perfect. And like we'll look at cultures through, rose-coloured glasses. And I suppose what I mean by that is we've just had Australia Day here in January, the end of January. And there's always this sort of typical backlash every year, although I'm finding it's less and less. I think a lot of people have just said, no, we're Australian, we can celebrate being Australia, that's fine, which is fine by me. But what I find is that what we've done in the West is, in general in the West, what we've done is we've said every part of our history is evil and bad and wrong. Everything we do is evil and bad and wrong. And every other culture, any of the cultures that we deem to be oppressed, right? So whatever fits into the super progressive, oppressed category, those are all looked at through rose tinted glasses as being wonderful and perfect. And of course, that's ridiculous. And of course, that's not helpful. But the truth is that we actually need to look at all cultures and all everything the same way through just reality, right? So all religions have their drawbacks and have their positives. All cultures have their drawbacks and positives. All history, look back at all of history, everyone's history, wherever they've come from, there's going to be things in that history of that those people that are not so good, or choices that they've made, or individuals. There's going to be things that we've done that are not so good, things we've done that are good. And when we only choose to look at one side or the other, we're just not being realistic. And so when you choose to sort of put one group in the untouchable, cloak of victimhood status so that they are untouchable and you can't say anything bad about them and you can't pick on them and you can't laugh at them and you certainly can't question anything they do because it's all wonderful. And then you choose whoever the oppressors are, and the oppressors, you can laugh at them and you can pick on them and basically put down all of their culture. It's the kind of stuff that's happening in the world at the moment. And look, maybe you could argue it was the other way around at some point, and yeah, that's probably true in a lot of ways. However, it's just not useful to play these games. And I think that we've got to a point now where, it's 2026. Haven't we got to a point now where we can say, okay, we can tell the truth about all of our cultures. We can tell the truth about all of our history. And the truth means acknowledging the things that we got wrong, acknowledging the bad things, acknowledging evil where it existed, all of the things that have happened in history that, we could have done better, or that we should have done better, or we did very, very poorly, but also acknowledge all of the things we've achieved and all of the wonderful things we've done in our culture. Why we can't just do that for every culture? It's ridiculous, right? So we just need to be able to do that for everyone. So while it's right and fine and a good thing for, say, Australia to accept our past, we need to accept all of it and we need to honor it, and we also need to celebrate some of it as well, and celebrate how far we've come and what we've learned and how we've grown. And but the problem with this grievance culture is it just wants us to stay forever and ever and ever in this, cloak of victimhood thing where we just hate on ourselves and 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 love on the victim class, and full stop. It doesn't achieve anything. It doesn't get anyone anywhere, because that victimhood cloak literally does suck the life out of the person who's wearing it. And, that comes back to that thing that I've talked about here many times, and I think I talked about it last week as well. But we take away people's agency when we put them in a victim class. Once we decide that you are the perennial victim and that you have to just accept victimhood, and we've decided as a society that you need us to save you because you're a victim and your life is so bad and it can never be okay unless we tick this box or do this thing or say this thing or someone affirms you in a certain way, or unless, all the people who are of the oppressor culture, bow down and apologize forever and all that sort of stuff. Just, it doesn't work. It doesn't help anyone ultimately. And actually, the other thing that I've been reading at the moment, I'm still reading it, is Tony Abbott's latest book. I'm trying to remember what it's called now, but Tony Abbott has a book. I'll look it up while I'm talking to. But Tony Abbott has a new book about Australian history, and it's actually really good for exactly that reason, because what he's doing in his book is he's actually just talking about the truth. This is the true history of Australia. These are the things that we did really badly. These are the things that we did really well. These are the things that we can celebrate. And so it's called Australia a History. There you go, Australia a History. And there's this TV series attached to it as well. Really, really good, because, again, it's not about denying anything bad that's ever happened. It's absolutely not. However, at some point we need to make a choice to, people always talking about healing and joining together and all of those things. But all I see is identity politics that's there just to divide everybody. So if we want to come together and we want to heal, a lot of that's got to be, some really bad things have happened in the world, and these are the things that we own, that we did, that are part of our culture and part of our history. But these are all the great things we've done, and let's just move forward together. And I think every culture around the world will benefit from doing that, but particularly Western cultures, because we're basically we're killing ourselves. We really are. We're destroying our own culture by being ashamed, totally ashamed of everything about our history and our culture, and telling and trying to create victims wherever we find them, and trying to be the saviors for all these victims as well. So it's messed up stuff. And like I've said before, it's interesting when you look at whether it be charities or political groups or lobbyists, all different people who benefit from grievance, who benefit from having someone to fight for. They all lose, whether it be votes or purpose or income or all of those things. Think of how much they all lose when that thing gets fixed. And that makes you understand why a lot of things just won't ever get fixed. They're just not going to fix a whole bunch of stuff, because it's where they make too much money out of not fixing it and fighting for it, or they feel good about themselves because they get to fight for it and feel so heroic that they're fighting for this thing. And a lot of the things that we're fighting for in our Western society at the moment are made up things. They're made up things that aren't there, or they're completely back to front made up things. And so we feel so important. I saw there was an article I just saw today of a young woman who said that, and she's based in the US. And at the moment in the US, in Minnesota, they've got all of this fighting against ICE. And, that's a whole other kettle of fish, the US politics. But ICE basically are the people who deport people, but that's not just deporting people, because what they're doing is they deal with sex traffickers and drug traffickers and all of that sort of stuff. So they're just dealing with all those kinds of things. And these bunch of protesters and sort of Hollywood actors and stuff. Honestly, the longer I live, the more disappointing. Oh, Bruce Springsteen. The more disappointed I am with these idiots who are so far up their ass that they live in these big mansions behind big gated fences with permanent security, and they're so far up their ass they think they're wonderful. And the sort of crap that they come out with is ridiculous. Again, they're not fighting. 35,000 people have died in Iran, and they're not fighting for those people, but they're fighting for the people who deliberately go out on the street and physically go up against law enforcement. Now, deaths are tragedies when they happen, and I'm not glorifying in any way the deaths of the people involved here, but there's a difference between people fighting for their lives in Iran so they can have freedom, and people deliberately driving their car in front of ICE cars and trying to cut them off and trying to confront them and all that sort of stuff. Anyways, this woman who is one of the protesters over there, she said, I can't have children now, and I was going to start a business this year, but I can't do that because now I'm going to have to fight and save all of the who's she going to save? She's going to save all of the sex traffickers and drug traffickers. That's who she wants to save. But sure, Jan, maybe you just didn't have much going in your life, and this makes you feel important. And that's what so much of it is. So much of it is, I don't feel important. I don't have purpose because we haven't gone out in the world and created purpose for ourselves. And someone comes along and says, oh, you're saving all the poor, insert victim group. You're saving this victim group from this insert bully, insert oppressor. And once you've got that fixed in place and someone tells you, oh, now I get to be a good person, I get to go out and save people, I get to put on my cape and go out and be the savior for this victim class. Oh, aren't I wonderful? Purpose for living. Why wouldn't you want that purpose rather than the purpose of actually trying the hard yards of starting a business or having a child, right? I get it. It's attractive that you just get to be special and important and such a good person and so morally worthy and so wonderful, and you're just saving the world. What could be better than that, right? And that's exactly what people are doing. They've done it with their environmental cause for years. All the women who wouldn't have children because the world was about to end, we see it all the time, mentally ill, right? So getting back to what I was talking about before is, we something I've talked about before in previous episodes is I've talked about forging your identity, forging who you are, going out and becoming the person you're meant to be and finding purpose. And purpose actually more often than not comes from things like having a job or starting a business or doing a course. It comes from having family, having children, all of those things. Now, I'm not saying it can't and doesn't come from activism or politics or those sorts of things, because I get energy from those things as well. So I'm not sort of saying that anyone who gets energy from those things or gets really into those things is wrong or bad or whatever. But what I am saying is that there's many people who do that now. There's grievance politics. They're just professional grievance complainers who get to go around and protest about everything. Many of those people, in my opinion, they got nothing going on, and it's the only thing they can do that makes them feel worthwhile or important. And I think that's sad. If it's, when it's you're really fighting for something real, that's one thing. But when it's not a real thing, but I don't have to go and do life now because I've got to go and save the world. Yay me! There's. Do you see what I get? I don't know if I'm making sense or not. I'd love to hear your feedback if you think I'm making sense with this. But there's a distinction, and there's a distinction between I'm going to do this thing because I think it's the right thing to do, and I'm going to do this thing that is instead of having a life. They're very different things. They're very different things, and there's different energies behind it, because there's the energy of I truly believe this is wrong, and I need to help the world and I want to make a difference. There's a very different energy around that and wanting to do that and being well intentioned with that, and being absolutely brainwashed and unable to think for yourself and just being told that this is the victim and this is the oppressor and go and hold up your placard and this is much more important than having your own life. I know that I just think there's people who avoid life and just get to be angry all the time. And look, and probably on both sides. I'm not saying it's like a one-side thing either. I'm not saying that all people who are left are bad and all people who are right are good or anything like that. Not saying that at all. But just interesting at the moment, right now, looking at people, looking at politics, looking at the world, looking at mental health issues, particularly in young people. There's a lot of mentally ill people out there who are serial protesters, and they very much correlate together. And I think it's because people need purpose. Human beings, we need purpose. And I think that's essentially, like I talked about a while ago, I talked about my choice, but not choice, because ultimately I wasn't able to have children. And I didn't have children, and it was not something I ultimately was able to do. And I accept that, and it's okay. Not all of us are meant to have children. But I really do feel that if you can have children, or if you can have people in your life that you care for, like I've cared a lot for parents and other people in my life. But when we have purpose in our life, it can make a really big difference to how we feel about ourselves. And then if you can add to that, like for myself, where it's been a certain point, a certain amount of your career or your work that you feel good about, that you feel accomplished in, all of those things can make a difference. And also being able to be in a healthy long-term relationship as well. All of those things are a really important part of, I think, having a good life. And I think when we don't have those things, I think sometimes we look for something to fill that hole. And what we choose to fill that hole with doesn't always fill us up. And in some cases, there are people who are, Rosie O'Donnell's one of them, who are seeing therapists because of their Trump derangement syndrome. And because they can't think of anything else and they can't sleep and they can't live and they have to leave the country because they feel unsafe. Now, again, I've talked about this before. You might hate Trump, you might love Trump, you might be somewhere in the middle. Yeah, fine, whatever, however you feel, that's fine. But it's one thing to just dislike a person or dislike his policies or say he could do that better, but he did that terribly. Fine, and be able to sleep at night. It's a whole other thing to have this level of Trump derangement syndrome where it's all you think about, and you've got to have therapy. And it's got to have therapy because it's an imagined thing, like as if Rosie O'Donnell and her non-binary child were in danger in the US. They weren't in danger in the US, but they had to move to, where did they move to? I think they're in Ireland, because they're in danger in the same as like Ellen and her girlfriend had to move to the UK because, they're in danger in the US. You're not in danger for being gay or for whatever it is. How ridiculous is that? And that's the thing, that like making up stories, it's one thing you can, like I said, you hate Trump, love Trump, whatever. You can hate politicians or dislike them and vote for them, vote against them. You can march or protest about whoever or whatever. Fair enough, great, But just be aware of if it's affecting your mental health and your ability to function and your happiness in your life, and if you're creating stories like the people who are unsafe to be gay are the people living in places like Iran, right? Not the people living in the US or in Australia. Or don't make up stories that just there's some of those on the street interviews I saw a few weeks ago. Actually, it was just in the last week or so, and they were interviewing these young American women and saying to them, who are they safer? Where would they be safer as young women? Where would they have a better life, in the US or in Iran? And they almost all of them said Iran. They actually thought their life would be better in Iran because they've got no rights in America. They haven't had any rights taken off them, but they've got no rights in America. It's amazing the story we can tell ourselves. So, look, I think I'll leave it there with just saying, so I've watched some interesting things. I think they're all worth watching and listening to. Tony Abbott's book is worth listening to or reading. I think politics is an interesting thing, and I'm passionate about politics. I have strong opinions. I'm wrong about some things, right about some things. We're all wrong and right about some things. It's fine. And I think it's okay to have these conversations. And one of the reasons I'm saying these things is because I think we've got to have these conversations. It's okay. I'm not evil and bad for any opinions I have, and you're not evil and bad for whatever opinions you have. None of my opinions are go out and kill people or anything like that. They're just, hey, we've got different ways of looking at things. But I think that be aware that maintaining a good mental health requires trying to be in reality somewhere. And if you find you're getting too caught up one way or the other, just go and chill, get away from politics for a while, get away from your device for a while, get away from social media for a while. But also be prepared to, if I've said things that you find challenging, well, rather than kind of just going, oh, well, I'm just going to shut that down, let yourself be challenged, right? I let myself be challenged. I listen to podcasts and watch things that I disagree with all the time, and I watch them or listen to them just to kind of check myself to go, okay, do I understand what the other side is thinking? Do I understand what they're thinking, why they're thinking it, and is where's the evidence, and why do I think what I think? So I can essentially question why I think this way and why I think this thing, and sometimes that allows me to shift a bit. Sometimes it just helps me be a bit more kind and caring about the person with a different opinion, whatever it is. But if you feel a bit challenged by hearing something that's different to what you normally hear in your echo chamber, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Let yourself be challenged. It doesn't mean you have to change your mind about stuff. We all have a right to believe whatever we believe, but let yourself be challenged a bit. I think it's healthy for all of us to let ourselves be challenged a bit, because when we question why we think the way we do, and is it my opinion, or is it just, did I just get it by osmosis through social media, through my friend group, through my television, through my work group, whatever. Just pay attention to that sort of stuff. Where do you believe the thing that you think you believe? And if you do, why? Where's your evidence? And then if you've got evidence, great. And then Is it something that's so big that you've got to put your life on hold, or that you've got to see a therapist because you can't sleep because you don't like a politician? Or is it something that you can go and, vote and do the things you want to do, but then you can go and have your life as well, right? So I suppose this has just turned into a look at how we look at politics and how we look at ourselves and how we manage our mental health around that. But I think it's a good idea for all of us to remember to do that. Remember to challenge yourself. Remember to find out what the other side think. You might learn something, and be okay with being challenged. It's actually healthy. We used to actually have political conversations, and we used to have debates, and it was healthy to do so. But now what we just do is we try and shut down the other side. On both sides this happens, so I'm not saying one person does it and the other person doesn't. But we try and shut down the other side, or we say, oh, I don't have to listen to that person because that person's a far right wing or a far left wing or a blah, 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 insert whatever insult. So, yeah, I I got here somehow. I don't quite know how I got here. But anyway, look, I'd like to hear your feedback on the films I'm talking about, on the ideas I'm talking about, and am I challenged? Have I challenged you in something, or have I not? Do you agree with me? I don't know. Fine. Again, I like to have conversation. This is about real conversations, not a place to abuse each other, but a place just to have real conversations. So I'd like to have your feedback. Please remember to like, subscribe, share, and all that jazz. That's how other people find out about my podcast. And I hope you have a great week, and I will talk to you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.